Good morning, people. Welcome to Success Tree IAS. Today we will start Economic Survey 2016-17. So if you like our videos, you hit like, subscribe to our channel, and you can comment in the comment section below regarding any of the questions. So here we go. Regarding importance of economic survey, you can in both prelims and mains, both it is important. So that's why we'll do it comprehensively, not a just kind of view. Comprehensively, we'll do it. From prelims perspective, we need to develop certain understanding of the economic issues, certain economic policies of the government and the various schemes of government that it launches. We won't go deep into the accounting exercise, how they do the accounting practice while coming to the various data that is even being discussed in the survey. So we'll discuss our discussion will be solely on the how it can be used or how it is useful for our exam point of view. So as we are doing discussion from the GS point of view, so our discussion will be oriented in that regard only. For mains, it is survey remains every time very important. Certain time direct questions are asked, certain time they don't ask direct question, but still at many places the discussion done in survey can be used while writing the answers in GS paper 3 economy paper. Even in the last year mains exam, though you don't find the direct questions, but yes, definitely there were many places where the discussion that was done, the data that was used there can help you a lot in improving a score of GS paper 3. A lot of benefit you can gain from it. Though regarding prelims, you can get say schemes and all these information somewhere else as well in your current affair notes or at different places. That is something you can find it overlapping at different places. But for mains, you may not get it. So that's why it becomes more important for your mains perspective. So we need to develop the understanding first. Secondly, then we'll try to remember the things, because the difference between PT and mains is what? In PT you can get the options. Even somehow you recall the concept, you can attempt the question. The mains, it's a different ball game altogether. You need to recall exactly what it was. If some data, you need to recall exactly what the data was. So that's why for mains it requires more of the revision, because you have to recall exactly what is given there. Now regarding data and all, how you can do that, initially our focus will be on, I'm telling how do you do it, because on the first reading you have to do the multiple readings for sure. So on the first reading, you understand the thing, understand the concept. As you do here, we will mention certain data that is important. Try to remember it. You may not remember it, that is a different thing, right? It happens, but try to remember it. Focus more on the understanding. Second reading, more understanding, you will be able to remember then. Third reading, fourth reading, then ultimately, once you do 4, 5, 6 readings of the same survey, then you try to remember the data also. And in the final reading, you make the notes. Notes of what? Only certain keywords, certain key points in the data, that's it. Because rest application, rest analysis, you remember because you read it many times. Just by looking at the keywords, you can remember the analysis behind it. So finally, your final touch should be on the data that can be used in the mains exam. And that can happen only if you've done it multiple revisions of this. Even you won't require any certain book to read it to attempt the mains economy paper. If you have the clarity of the basic concepts and you have updated yourself on the current and economic survey, so you can religiously do this economic survey. So you start with 8 interesting facts about India. In the initial, it tells about the railway passenger traffic data that tells about work-related migration annually of about 9 million people. So it just tells that annual work-related migration of about 9 million people. So it has doubled almost from 2011 census. So just it tells about migration. So you can remember or no, you can even leave this as well. Coming to second, it tells about the credit rating comparison of India and China. Come to this next one. This is more important. On weak targeting of social programs. So this welfare spending, it tells about misallocation problem of India. Means the district with the most poor indicators that they suffer the greatest shortfall of the fund. And the most poor districts have the shortfall, have the most severe shortfall of the funds. So it tells about the misallocation, where the allocation should be more. The districts which are more poor, isn't it? So it tells how misallocation of the funds happens. Then it says the district accounting for the poorest 40% receive 29% of the total funding. Now this is the data you should remember, because this data substantiate your argument that 40% of the poorest, they get only 29% of total funding. So you can see the red marks there. Share of poor districts here, shortfall in location to poor districts, the large shortfall, red one again. The most poor states and these shortfall maximum are the same areas, right? These certain areas. Coming to next one, political democracy, but do we have fiscal democracy? So this is another area. So what do you mean by fiscal democracy? Yes, Kavi. Have you heard about this term earlier? So it helps you to remember or bring certain new terms as well, catchy terms as well to use.
You can interpret fiscal.
You can interpret, you can use. No mark shall be deducted.
Federal cooperation, sir. Federalism, sir.
बताइए क्या बताना चाह रहे हैं?
The distribution of funds from center to.
नहीं. Last, what's your name?
Prithvi, sir.
Sorry?
Prithvi.
Prithvi.
Yeah.
बताइए.
I don't know exactly.
You can try.
Equal distribution of money or something.
Anchit?
So maybe talks about the liability of all the people to pay taxes, even if financially
Correct.
they should be part of.
This is what this term means. What do you mean by political democracy? Means every people participate in voting in election.
Okay.
This is what actually it is. Fiscal democracy, what do you mean by fiscal? Means how the government spends money and how the government raises money from the people, resources. Now from where these resources come? Taxes. So fiscal democracy means whether people participate in paying taxes or not. So that's why the statement questioning fiscal democracy of India. We are politically democratic country, but poor on the fiscal democracy. How? This data suggests that only 7 taxpayers for every 100 voters. Means 7% of the voters pay taxes only. Last year the survey suggested 4%. Now it is 7%. Though improvement is there, right? But still 7%. And ranking around 13th among 18th of our democratic G20 peers. You can remember it, but at least remember this 7%. 7 taxpayers for every 100 voters.
So can you please explain this graph?
Taxpayer per 100 voters?
No, like this one, the poorest one.
Yeah, it only shows that you can see the red blocks there.
So it talks about the poorest district, they are not getting proper allocation.
Correct. This is what it tells.
So the red, this shows the existing poor, like 8 like districts in our India. This shows the allocation.
Shortfall. Shortfall of funds. Shortfall in allocation.
They are poor and still also like they are poor and allocation is also
low
over there.
Yes, there is.
It's a coincidence. They're coinciding.
Yeah, they're coinciding. Whereas the strategy should be more poor districts, more funds should be there for the more equitable development of the country.
So this northeast, sir, what is this like?
So they left.
White indicates?
They have left. So NA, they don't have much data about it. I think so.
Oh.
Right. So don't go much. Just understand the things. If you understand the things, you can apply this. ठीक है?
Like अगर ये question है Deccan area में.
नहीं question ये आएगा तुम बहुत ज़्यादा मतलब इतना अपने आप को नहीं करना है. Right? Because even the people having economic option, they won't read like this everything too much into the technical things. अंडरस्टैंडिंग बनानी है एंड हाउ टू यूज इट. एटलीस्ट हम बता रहे कि इंपॉर्टेंट है वो तो एग्जैक्टली यू रिमेंबर इट. I was trying to discuss something else, just slipped from my mind. Okay, so another data that you can use to decide that whether this fiscal democracy is weak in India. One thing is definitely low taxes that you can substantiate by 7 taxpayers out of 100 voters. Secondly, tax to GDP ratio. You should remember how much is that. Last year's survey suggested 16.6%. So 16.6% is yours tax to GDP ratio. How much it should be? Somewhere around 23%. And what is debt to GDP ratio? These are two different things. Debt to GDP. Now debt to GDP ratio is around 67%. 66-67% around this is. And it should be around 60%. Now coming to next point, next factor. So we'll try to complete this survey in the around 5 classes. Okay. Now India's distinctive demographic dividend. So 4 to 5 classes. Let's see how easily we cover it. So it tells about demographic dividend, demographic potential, working age to non-working age population ratio. So what it says that this ratio of working age to non-working age population will peak later and at a lower level than other countries but last longer. Means peak will be later and at a lower level as well. Means we won't peak to the same level as other countries they have done. So means our peak will be at lower level, but it will last longer. Means the higher level of peak in our country, this will be for longer period of time. So we'll keep on getting that benefit for a longer period of time for that peak particular. Why so? It tells about the things that uh, this peaking of this demographic potential, it is varying across the states. Across the peninsular states, it shall peak early, and the hinterland states that will peak later on. So that's you can read further. The peak of the growth boost due to demographic dividend is fast approaching, with peninsular states peaking soon and the hinterland states peaking much later. So do you understand this concept? Okay. Even they've shown India's graph in respect to other countries as well, that this has been peak for India, but it is lasting longer. Whereas China, you see a sudden peak and a sudden shortfall, right? Same with Korea, Brazil. India's peak is, though it is at the lower from these relative other countries, but for a longer period of time it is doing it. Then in the states comparison, you can find that hinterland states, they peak at the higher level early, and the peninsular state do early at the higher level than the hinterland states. Coming to next, India trades more than China and a lot within itself. So it tells about that India's openness to trade. So in comparison to China, India trades more, and more of our trade is within India, across the states. So India's internal trade to GDP is also comparable to that of other large countries and very different from caricature of a barrier-riddled economy. Coming to this property tax potential unexploited, this remains again one of the gray area. That property taxation, the last survey also focused that property taxation should be strengthened to empower the local bodies and to encourage more and more, you can say, tax paying by the people, as well as more revenue to the government, specifically the local government. So property taxation potential is still unexploited and should be strengthened further. So this is the focus area.
So, sir, property tax is only on commercial or with the homes also?
It is a property, whatever it is. So evidence from satellite, so they say just discuss about this property taxation is low. Even to develop the smart city program effectively. So ultimately we need to say make these local bodies more financially uh, viable in a long term, right? And how they can become financially more viable if they have their resources available to them, sustainable resources. So that can happen if they can raise resources from that area only. So property taxation can empower these local bodies and further to strengthen the smart city programs also.
Sir, can you lower the screen? Like this graph, internal trade graph. I want to see the.
Hmm. Which one?
Yes, sir.
Hmm.
Sir, India is 30.
34%.
34. So, what is this spatial dispersion in income?
Spatial dispersion means across the space, across the region, the difference in the income. So it says that despite more porous borders within India than between countries internationally, so the force of convergence has been elusive. Means still you find the inequitable development more than the equitable.
So they have explained it later as
Correct.
that when GDP is rising, when country is growing, inequality is reducing.
Right.
But in India,
It
it
is
is going
right.
vice versa.
So the wedge between inequality has grown a lot, and this is despite the internal borders are still, there is more trade. Means what do you mean by this? Despite more porous borders means in the just earlier figure we discussed, the internal trade is quite good in India, and this is happening despite that. Now coming to this first chapter, economic outlook and policy challenges. Now the first chapter it will take maximum more of the time than the other chapters. Why? Because this chapter has brief, everything in brief, whatever the survey discusses in the later chapters. So we won't delve much of the time. Don't raise question on each and everything because those things we will be discussing in the later chapters in detail. So just get a brief idea what this first chapter tells. So as the last year economic survey suggested that we are on the sweet spot, and there were certain steps taken by the government in the reform to bring the reforms. For example, GST has been one of the thing. Then action to demonetize 500,000 notes, demonetization also. So it tells. So in every chapter, what happens there? The first this certain kind of the italic lines. So these lines brief the whole chapter. So the importance of this: read this 2-3 times. Then you read the whole chapter. Then again you read the first one. Then every different things they divide the whole chapter into different parts, and then it helps in the quick revision of the whole chapter. Okay. So it tells about that the GST will create. These are common points of the benefits of GST you can find anywhere. That common Indian market on tax, improve tax compliance, governance, boost investment and growth. Definitely. So all these are benefits. Moreover, it also strengthens or it paves India to move towards cooperative federalism. This is something you should remember. It gives you some different dimension of this GST. How cooperative federalism is pursued by GST. Yes, Priyadarshini.
Sharing of taxes between state and center.
Sorry, speak loudly.
Sharing of taxes between center and state
Correct.
will grow, and, mm, and the taxes behind governments also will improve.
सही बता रहे हैं to particular extent कि हाँ there shall be distribution of taxes, sharing of taxes between center and state. Also cooperation in the tax administration, because if you see the jurisdiction of the SSCs between center and state, so now the central, say for example, which department shall be responsible at central level for this?
GST
GST Council.
Means to collect the taxes, I'm asking. Central Excise and Customs Department, right? So there shall be more coordination between central department and the state department. Why? Because the same SSCs are there. They are paying taxes to the say state, also to the center. And now so jurisdiction have been divided in the way, for example, till 1.5 crore it shall be assessed by the state authorities. More than that, shared 50%. 50, I think this is the way how they do it, right? And moreover, even while coming to say finalization of GST, there has been huge discussion, say give and take between center and state in the GST Council. Deliberation, debate, discussion, right? So that also shows that even implementation or passing of the GST Council Amendment Bill, it is a way, or it has been pursued because of higher cooperation between center and states. Then it says more follow-up actions to minimize the cost and maximize the benefits. How it can be further? Fast demand-driven remonetization, because now after demonetization, shortfall in currency notes, so need to remonetize faster. And now we are seeing somehow remonetization process on the faster sense, and things coming to normalcy to some extent. Further tax reforms, bringing land and real estate into GST, reducing tax rate and stamp duties. You've seen tax rates have been reduced, right, from 10% to 5% below 5 level income, and acting to allay anxieties about overzealous tax administration. Certain challenges they discuss: inefficient redistribution, ambivalence about the private sector and property rights, and improving but still challenge state capacity. So another challenge, gloom about globalization as we are seeing in the world. So if we discuss the challenges, now these will be discussed separately in this chapter. Inefficient redistribution means redistribution, understand, right? Means first you draw the resources and redistribute among people by various schemes, programs to reduce inequality and all, to provide basic services, basic amenities. Ambivalence about private sector, property rights. So this will be discussed separately in chapter. State capacity. Now also the things going on around in the world also affecting bringing challenges to India. What are those challenges? We discuss in the budget also. These बताइए प्रियदर्शनी. Do you remember certain global challenges that India could face, Indian economy could face? Things that are happening around in the world, how these things, yeah?
So oil prices.
Oil price, deglobalization.
बहुत अच्छा. Deglobalization means things going for that more orientation towards protectionism. Examples?
US, UK.
Yes, good examples. What else?
Oil prices.
Oil prices are
US
also
Fed
rising.
rates.
Correct, good. US Fed rates rising also has adverse impact on the emerging economies. So it starts with the same, the GST that we have discussed just now. So then come to next page. So discuss starts with demonetization. So aim of the demonetization we have discussed. So as you discuss in the Yojana, so many things will be repetitive, right? You understand this topic better. Why? Because you have been experiencing this, right? So once you experience certain things over a period of time, so you get more comfortable in understanding that topic as well. So the aim: curb corruption, counterfeiting, use of high denomination notes for terrorist activities, especially the accumulation of black money generated by income that has not been declared to the tax authorities. So these are fourfold objectives: curb corruption, curb counterfeiting, and use of these notes for the terrorist activities, and finally black money. So in 4 चीजों के लिए this was the main objective. certain earlier efforts that have been done for this. Now these efforts we have discussed in Yojana also. आप लोग बताइए क्या क्या same points हैं. Yes, Vibhu.
Sir, SIT, Benami Transactions Act 2016. Correct. And there was also one, that income disclosure scheme.
बहुत अच्छे.
And
आप बताइए.
Mauritius के साथ DTA, Switzerland, with Switzerland we have a treaty to tell about the Swiss accounts.
So what do you call it? Automatic exchange of information.
And
so DTA has been renegotiated with
Mauritius,
Singapore, Cyprus, right? Kavi? Demonetization also, है ना? और कुछ बताइए. GST
इनकम डिस्क्लोजर.
इनकम डिस्क्लोजर बता चुके हैं. ठीक है.
ग्रामीण
गरीब कल्याण योजना. ठीक है. Black money code also, black money law has also been enacted. So these are all the steps, efforts. You can see that SIT, Black Money Act, Benami Transaction Act, Information Exchange with Switzerland, tax treaty changes or renegotiation, Mauritius, Cyprus and Singapore. Singapore is also there, you can add that. An income declaration scheme. So you are reading these multiple times, so I believe you remember those. Then say the demonetization will create certain short-term cost but long-term benefits. Short-term cost in terms of the hardship, inconvenience, long queues, some people died as well, right? So there are various costs that it could lead. So we cannot say, if somebody asks you whether demonetization led to the, say, death of the people. So what's your opinion on that?
So it's a natural thing. Like you can't, it's not a solely responsible factor.
Yes, because no inquiry has established these things, right? Don't just solely rely on the news media reports. Means for UPSC answer writing perspective, definitely.
No one lies.
Right? Yeah, means if the inquiry establishes certain facts, then we can say, as these are things that we have read somewhere in the news. So certain other things definitely, though people face the inconvenience and could have resulted into that particular level as well, but no established inquiry has established these facts together, that it has happened because of demonetization. So we cannot link directly. Then long-term benefits that this act can expect, that is curbing corruption, greater digitalization of economy, increased flows of financial saving. How financial savings could be more?
Because the money is coming in the bank.
Yes, correct. Now more money available to the banks, right? Greater formalization of the economy, and all of which could eventually lead to higher GDP growth, better tax compliance, and greater tax revenues. Coming to the next page, they discuss about certain actions could be needed accordingly. The policy response could also be according to that. One thing is remonetization should be at the quick level. Then implementation of GST and bringing land and real estate into GST. Reducing taxes and stamp duties, ensuring both follow-up demonetization does not lead to overzealous tax administration. So the same thing they have repeated here again, whatever discussed in the first paragraph. What do you mean by this? Follow-up to demonetization does not lead to overzealous tax administration?
So then after demonetization, the tax authority wouldn't be in a, they won't be overzealous to tax the people more at more rate.
Correct. The thing is, means they should not be overzealous in the way to tax in an incorrect way, right?
It shouldn't be an incentive for the tax authority to, yes, we can tax the people more.
Yes. Thing is, even the honest taxpayer should be treated with the respect and dignity. It should not lead to the tax terrorism, in fact. And these are the benefits they have given again. Same thing again they have repeated here as they were done in the first paragraph. Then overhaul the bankruptcy laws. So these, in addition, the government has done what? The GST is something, right? Then bankruptcy laws. Last year, bankruptcy law was enacted, Insolvency and Bankruptcy Act, to solve the problem of exit, right? Then codified institution arrangement on monetary policy with regard to RBI. So now we have monetary policy committee. So now more democratic way of doing that. So it says it will be less susceptible to whims of individuals and caprice of the government. Why? Because now there is committee shall decide over it. And legal basis for Aadhaar Act, though there is controversy linked to Aadhaar, how it was enacted as a money bill. Now there are different ways how they discuss about demonetization, role of NPCI, UPI, Aadhaar, so Jan Dhan Aadhaar, mobile. So come to next. Come to 1.1718 on state capacity. Now, because in the first page itself we discussed poor state capacity, right? State capacity, they discussed that on part of, say, attracting investment. So state capacity they have discussed about, on one thing they have discussed about uh, in later time about competitive federalism, right? What is state capacity? What do you understand by state capacity?
Whether it can provide basic services.
Correct. Yes. Whether the government can provide, state can provide essential basic services to the people or not. So it can depend upon what? Majorly on the whether the government has sufficient resources. Secondly, whether the providing of the services is efficient or not, is reaching to the people or not, right? So it says on terms of health and education, it has been more or less impaired. Health and education, state subjects, right? Now the issue becomes more in that. However, on the say of competitive federalism, states have competed good enough while attracting investment. You have seen in the southern states how, say, Telangana, Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, Gujarat, even Haryana, and Rajasthan also. Haryana, Rajasthan relaxed their labor laws, right? The same way Telangana enacted Right to Clearance Act. Now, how see Andhra Pradesh is giving so much relaxation to bring investment. And so they're competing in a healthy way to bring more and more investment, right? So that's a good way forward. But they're not competing with each other in terms of providing health and education services to the optimal level, where the state capacity is low. And it also showcased the poor redistribution from the government side. So understand from this the competitive federalism. What do you mean by the competitive federalism? I believe you understand now, it has been used a lot. The cooperative federalism, competitive federalism. What is that, Anchit?
So when the states are competing with each other in order to provide the best services and eventually public.
So it can be on different terms. It can be on the, say, attracting investment, on these providing various services also, right? But there are certain exceptions are there. That on certain grounds, certain states have done quite well, even on providing these kind of services. For example, PDS in Chhattisgarh, they have in fact got accolade from wide over the country. Then agriculture in MP, reforms in power sector in Gujarat, efficiency of social programs in Tamil Nadu, and recent use of technology to help make Haryana kerosene free. In the budget also they discussed this thing, that Chandigarh and 8 districts of Haryana, they have been made kerosene free. Now read the last line, it is important, you need to remember this, should remember this basically. Competitive populism need a counterpart in competitive service delivery. What do you understand by this? This can come as a statement also in the exam. In paper 3, if the question comes, competitive populism needs a counterpart in competitive service delivery. Discuss or critically analyze, whatever way it comes. We start with Kavi. What do you? You want to take some time to understand it?
Okay. States compete with each other to become popular. States compete with each other to become popular.
Popular in what sense?
So from this statement, from my understanding, so by doing delivering the services, sir, by social welfare schemes, announcing order.
Priyadarshini?
A competition between state in providing basic services.
Means what do you mean by this? बताइए थोड़ा ठीक से बताइए. Question आ जाते हैं ऐसे, right? बताइए आप.
So this line tells that having competitive populism is okay, but a state or an institution it needs to it needs the capacity to provide that services also. Then only it can counterpart the populism part. If you would have populism, but you need to have such efficiency that such thing could be provided as
right. That's the thing that this line discusses. What else, Vibhu, if you have something else?
Sir, like competitive populism, like state political parties try to attract the voter. Correct. By giving free stuff, but but this is not part of that service delivery.
Definitely. So these two things needs to be integrated. The two people they have told beautifully. So means you've seen the populism, different parties, different states going for free buys and each and everything. We will do this, we'll do that. Laptops, ये वो ठीक है. But that has to be there like competitive service delivery. कि भी बस laptop बांटने से it won't help much. You have to provide the basic services and compete in that. Same thing, announcing schemes. It can also be can be connected in this way as well. Competitive populism means you announce so many schemes in a competition way from the different states, but you don't bring the implementation part efficient. In providing the basic services, then you lack. Because announce करने में जोर नहीं पड़ता है, right? It discuss about ambivalence towards the private sector and property rights. Ambivalence towards private sector in the way how we have been the socialist kind of the mindset earlier. Now, even in the present stance, on the different ways we find, even for example, in the twin balance sheet problem, if we take for example, even if the bankers decide to waive off the loans, that could be one of the solution, but definitely it could do what? It could attract the agony of the people, that it's somehow favoring the private sector. Right. So there are different instances that we'll discuss in the coming chapters, how there is ambivalence still towards the private sector and the property rights. Here they discuss this as well, that persistence of twin balance sheet problem, over indebtedness in corporate and banking sector, which require difficult decisions about burden sharing and perhaps even forgiving some burdens on the private sector. The legacy issue of the retroactive taxation, which remains mired in litigation even though the government has made clear its intention in the future. Agriculture, where the protection of intellectual property rights, for example, seeds remain a challenge. Reform in civil aviation, you still find civil aviation sector, the government not looking for privatizing it or whatever the way, still despite losses, still want to make it a world class despite its ruining the government revenues. In the fertilizer sector, also the same thing. So still the government feels it's beneficial to rehabilitate unviable plants in the public sector, then privatizing them or paving the way for exiting them. Same way in the APMCs, still the government not looking to liberalize that. The various state governments, despite knowing this is creating troubles for the farmers. So these are the various points regarding this ambivalence towards the private sector. Then tells about international order. We have discussed the Brexit, US election. You understand direction of isolationism and nativism. Come further, global context. The global interest rate Coming further, page number 7. Even the political carrying capacity for globalization is declining. Rise of dollar will have implication for China's current. Now come to this point number 1.27. One of the development in US, especially the rise of dollar. This will have implication for China's currency. And why rise of dollar?
Because it is increasing the interest rate, so money is coming back
Correct.
to US.
Good, right? So rise of dollar, it has implication for China's currency and currency policy. Discusses how. How is that? Because say in short run, though find that if Chinese currency, what is Chinese currency?
Yuan.
Yuan. And what is another name for it?
RMB.
Correct. Even this question has been asked, I think.
2016.
16, right? Or 15?
16, sir.
16.
It was included into that
IMF, yeah, reserved currency. So, in the short run, okay, fine. If the Chinese currency yuan declines, depreciate in respect to dollar, so Chinese economy can get benefit of it. Why? Exports. China's growth has been mainly led by exports in the past because it makes their products more competitive because that relies on the low cost manufacturing. Chinese growth that had been in the earlier times. But now China is trying to rebalance its economy. Rebalancing in what way?
Increasing the domestic demand.
Correct. Means one thing is export orientation growth to the consumption orientation growth. Export led growth to consumption led growth. How? How it can happen? Because the wages are rising in China. Once wages are rising in China, it leads to what? The product shall be costlier. So Chinese as on the low cost manufacturing will go away. So that's why you find a lot of manufacturing companies from China are shifting their locations from China to certain other economies which can provide edge on that. Because if you see the low cost manufacturing, they look for the low cost labor. Because even the labor wages rises by say small amount, they loses their competitiveness very fast. So that's why they are shifting to the various Southeast Asian countries like Vietnam, Indonesia, and even to India as well. So in the short run, fine, okay, fine. China could get benefit, but Chinese tendency to rebalance its economy shall get a hit. So understand this area of how what Chinese economy is passing through. Coming to next, GDP and inflation. Then we discuss about page number 9, major highlights of sectoral growth of first half of 16-17. What has we found? Moderation in industrial and non-government service sector. Modest pickup in agriculture. It just gives you an idea what has happened. Okay? Jarur nahi you need to remember each and everything, but get the understanding of our economy, what has been there in our economy. Modest pickup in agriculture growth on the back of improved monsoon. So how much growth rate is expected in agriculture? 4.1%. Try to relate it with the budget. In the budget, our FM said 4.1% agriculture productivity this year. On the back of strong monsoon and more sowing of the rabi crops. And strong growth in the public administration defense services. Now just keep on flipping on your pages. Come to next page. Even on the inflation front, we have. So what it wanted to say that overall in macroeconomic front, we have somehow become comfortable than the previous years. In the last 2 years, Indian economy has improved a lot. We have improved on the different fronts like fiscal deficit, right? So we have even 3.2% or how much for the fiscal deficit? 3.1% somewhere around, right? So they're targeting for 3% next and 2.9% for the next, right? On the current account deficit also around 1%, so we are very much comfortable on that. Even on the forex, how much forex do we have?
360 billion.
Correct, around $360 billion. Inflation also very much comfortable. On WPI, even it had been in the negative trajectory some time, right? On CPI also around 5%. I think we are 3 to 5%. How much? 3.4%. Yeah, 4.5 to 5%. So around 5% you can say. Still we are. So what's the target for CPI? Now RBI is mandated to one of the major even sorry.
Five.
For RBI now, by law, now it has been mandated for RBI to maintain a particular, and it's a gap. It's not a particular one figure of inflation. It is a band of inflation, 2 to 6%, right? 4% plus minus 2%. This has been the target. Based on which committee? Urjit Patel committee. Correct. And it's CPI based. So same thing with the external sector. Discuss about our comfortability on the forex, on current account deficit. Capital inflows.
So do we need to study these graphs in detail?
You can just, the graphs are given, that explanation is given in the paragraphs. So you can read the paragraphs, get the understanding of the economy. If you think something you need to clarify more, you can refer the graph as well. It just gives an idea of how it is.
And so what about these boxes? Are each box important?
No, you cannot remember each and everything. That's why I told you survey is there to get the best for our GS point of view. ठीक है, तो उसको अच्छे से करना है. Even this current account, so you just need to remember how much current account deficit we have. ठीक है. Foreign exchange reserve, तो ये भी यही बता रहा है कि कितना forex हमारा है, and how it has been low in the say before 3-4 years. Now we have improved on that. Okay, what's the reason why this WPI, it had been in the negative trajectory, now it is rising, it has risen? Oil prices. And why this impact has not been so much on CPI?
Because their weightage.
Very good.
Basket.
Right. Because the weightage of petroleum products, these products are not so much in CPI. The weightage is more in WPI. The same thing is discussed in the fiscal one, how we are comfortable on the fiscal front. Fiscal deficit target 3.5% this year, 3.2%, 3%, 2.9%. If somebody tells you like the consolidated deficit of the states has increased steadily in the recent year, what's the reason for that? Basically, the consolidated deficit should be 6%. The consolidated fiscal deficit should be 6%. Means 3% for the central government and 3% for the collectively of all the state governments. Now it has increased from 2.5% to 3.6%. What is one of the reason for that? Do you understand this? Means just like fiscal deficit for central government, there is fiscal deficit for the state governments also. And targets are same, 3% for the central government and 3% collectively for all the state governments. Because of Udaya scheme is also one of the reasons. Because now the state government, they're asked to take over the debts of the state public, the power distribution companies, state discoms. Okay, if I ask you some question from the prelims point of view, tell me something. Will it have some impact on the, can it has this Udaya scheme, can it have some impact on the balance sheet of the banks?
Yes.
And balance sheet of the banks and or you can say to the credit flow to the private. Uday's scheme has impact on the credit flow to the private sector.
Yes.
Okay, विभू कह रहे हैं यस कवि समझे क्या कह रहे हैं उदय स्कीम की वजह से it will has impact adversely on the credit flow to the private sector from banks.
Adversely, you are saying.
Okay, you have your opinion, you can tell.
No.
It will have positive impact.
बताइए.
No, sir.
Positive.
So because these power discoms, they are working in like they are a sort of NPA to the bank. Maybe after giving up their part, they can perform well, and that money could be round trip into the bank and again get flowed into the market. Will eventually help for raising the currency growth.
Last बताइए आप.
Sir, is it NPA? I don't know about it.
Sorry.
That power sector is there. Those loans are NPAs or those are just normal loans. They couldn't pay or not.
The losses, yeah, they were NPAs, you could say.
Okay. Then you can.
But it is not. They did not clarify it whether NPA or not. But yeah, it was the losses, and they were But
Sir, if they are NPAs, there is some effect on private, and if they are not NPAs, eventually they have to pay. Anyhow, they have to pay the loan. There is no
correct
effect on that.
So how this? What the state government was asked to do?
State governments will pay the loans.
How they will pay the loans?
By disinvestment
bonds.
By issuing bonds. So क्या किया गया? State governments have issued bonds, banks they have taken the bonds, and they have given money to the. This is how this has been done. So it reduces the, you can say, space in that case. Reduces the space for the banks as well for further lending capacity. Are you getting this point?
Yes.
Come to the next. For the next year, the outlook, it has been discussed. How this demonetization for the in the three different ways: aggregate demand shock, supply shock, and uncertainty shock. How a demand shock? Because now less cash available in the economy for the along with the people, so demand definitely declines because of that. Supply shock. Supply in terms of economic activity relies on input. For example, solving requirements that require the use of labor traditionally paid in cash. It's basically why supply shock. Now, a lot of economic activity, even the production agencies, they require cash to be given to the labor in that way. So it also has the supply shock also. So the supply declines, demand declines, and uncertainty shock. Uncertainty, still people they were looking for it, how much impact it would be, right? So people they were having apprehensions. The companies they are having apprehensions. So it leads to lower, say, lower consumption from the people side. They hold on the consumption, and same way, the corporates they hold on onto the investment because of this uncertainty shock and how the government will deal with it. The policy measures you are not exactly sure about it, so because of this uncertainty. So they have been discussed in this way. When this demonetization was announced, 8th
October.
8th November.
November. 8th October, 8:32. 8:32.
It won't be asked well, but from the 12 in the night, it came into effect. Impact on GDP from the 5 broad indicators they have tried to bring. That is Rabi sowing, indirect tax revenue as a broad gauge production of sales, auto sales as a measure of discretionary consumer spending, and two-wheelers as the best indicator of both rural and less affluent demand, real credit growth, and real estate prices. So these are various ways by which the survey has tried to bring the data or indicators based linkage to GDP. Rabi sowing tells about its impact on the agriculture. indirect tax revenue in terms of production sales, because more production, more sales, more indirect tax revenue. Auto sale measures, same way. Two-wheelers, why two-wheelers? Because the cars will be bought by the more affluent people. Two-wheelers, it also tells about the impact, because see, for the impact on the informal economy, you cannot get directly. Why? Because informal economy, there is no accounting, no records. And similarly, how the contribution to GDP is estimated, how impact of demonetization on informal economy would be got. It is just by estimating their consumption pattern. Even the people working in informal economy, they consume, they buy the things, FMCG, two-wheeler sales. From there, they've tried to get the idea. Same with real credit growth and real estate prices. So we have seen rise in the sowing of the rabi crops, major rabi crops, wheat and pulses, by 7.1% and 10%, around 10.7%. Why rise? It has told the weather conditions were good, and to what extent demonetization will have impact will depend upon their access to the inputs. Come to the next. Next. Then in 1.58, page number 19, it discusses about its most affected impact on the informal and cash-based. Because informal economy, more or less, it's predominantly cash-based. So cash crunch, because with the demonetization of 500,000 high currency notes, it brought out 86% of currency in circulation. Even though demonetization has happened in the past as well. When it was done earlier?
1978.
46 and 78. At two different times it has been done earlier. But the impact has been more this time. Why? Because in the earlier times, say 1,000, 5,000, 10,000 notes, they were discontinued. Right? Now, you see the income level of during that period of time. People even having good income, they were having income like 1,000 rupees, 1,500 rupees, 2,000 rupees. Isn't it? So people say discontinuing 10,000 note, will it have an impact, large impact? No, not at all. Whereas in the present time, people's income increased, our growth increased, resulting into 500,000 notes. They became in fact daily based transaction level. So 86% of currency in circulation was of 500,000 notes. That's why the impact was huge this time. Similarly, its impact more on the informal economy. Why? The logic is given. It's more cash oriented. The same things are discussed again, that uncertainty because people reduce the consumption and firms put hold on to the investment. Outlook for 17-18, they say it depends upon how fast our economy gets remonetized. Remonetized means how fast these 500, 2,000 notes they comes into circulation. Now, whereas the issue of twin balance sheet is still hovering over our economy, and you don't find a clear-cut solution for this. Now, this economic survey proposes what? Public assets rehabilitation agency for that. What it proposes? Public assets rehabilitation agency for twin balance sheet problem. What had been the RBI efforts in the past to tackle the issue of twin balance sheet?
SDR.
SDR, yes. What is SDR?
Sorry,
Sorry? SDR क्या होता है? आपने बताया. Restructuring, strategic debt restructuring. What else? Different schemes like 525, SDR, Joint Lending Forum, S4A. ठीक है. फिर से आएंगे सारे, ठीक है. There is separate chapter with the twin balance sheet problem. Now, Main downside risk, it depends upon extent to which effect of demonetization would linger in the next year, means depends upon the effectivity of the remonetization. Second risk could be about geopolitics, that could further spiral up the oil prices then more than expected, because oil prices are expected to rise, we expect it, but if it rise more than the forecast. Third, to understand the impact of this, oil prices. If it is reduced, how positive impact? If it is increased, how negative impacts? So you can see in the last few lines of that, of the oil prices, whenever they are reduced consumption, because our economy is mainly, say, our import bills are majorly due to oil prices. At number one, it comes to be. At second number, what is second number in our import bill? At number one, it is oil.
Gold.
Gold, yes, right. So if the oil prices they increase more, what would be the impact? Reduce consumption, definitely. Less room for public investment. You understand this? How less room for public investment? How do you relate it? बताइए विभू, एक्सप्लेन कीजिए.
More subsidy.
Subsidy.
If the oil price increase, the government will make some subsidy.
सब्सिडी करेगा? क्यों सब्सिडी करेगा? सब्सिडी तो गवर्नमेंट हैज डन अवे विद सब्सिडी.
They won't decrease it. They won't bear the increased price.
Sorry?
Government, I'm asking. Government won't bear that increased price.
Government won't
bear that increased price.
Okay. What it will do?
Means if they bear that increased amount, there is some less money to invest in infrastructure.
That's how, because I'm not able to get your point exactly.
Sir, what is the question?
You read that point there first. It says less room for public investment because of higher rise in the oil prices, international oil prices.
Multiple effects. First will be that India is paying more, so exchange reserve is decreasing. India is paying more for the oil, so its currency will definitely fall. If it is now 60 rupees, then it will go to 70. So it will affect the investment.
Okay, one of the point. What else?
And government is also consumes oil.
बढ़िया.
Drilling would stop then.
बढ़िया, बहुत अच्छे.
And moreover,
the profit margin of the public oil sector companies will decline. Right? What else?
So carbon tax, there is a sense they are gaining huge from carbon tax. Carbon tax.
Carbon tax.
Yeah, from oil. From this,
in another way, you should explain a major point that, see, when the oil prices increases, it declines the corporate profit margin as well. They pay taxes. Overall, our economy basically depends on revenue for what? Taxes. When oil prices increases, the overall profit margin declines. Right now, people spend more money on the oil, so they're the same way you can explain. So this is the way how you deal with this. Because if you see less room for public investment, in two sense you can understand this thing. One sense, less revenue for the government. Second sense, more expenditure by the government. So from both segments, try to bring the points. समझिए क्या करें कभी? क्या समझे बताइए?
So we can the government has to spend more.
Now from this, for example, you need to deal with this less room for public investment.
Less room, yeah.
How do you create the points?
By the way, starting from tax, sir. Tax. By the way of tax, especially corporate tax, carbon tax using.
आप पहले समझाइए आप किस तरह से पॉइंट्स क्रिएट करेंगे, because this is something I want to make you understand. पॉइंट्स आप निकाल लेंगे, right? क्या समझना क्या चाह रहे हैं इससे? विभू आप बताइए, आप समझिए.
Two points are there, basically the major one. One is expenditure side, other is income side.
Correct.
Income side, corporate profit margin is falling. We can expand it further. And expenditure side, government is also spending that buying and all that. And moreover, people are paying more for the oil, so they're also
Right.
profit decrease, that income decrease.
Read the statement again. Less room for public investment means if the government wants to invest, go for the public investment, it will have lesser resources. This is the meaning of this. Now divide this in two parts. One part is that government has now lesser revenue itself because of this reason, higher oil prices. Secondly, now less revenue, why? Because government is expenditure has increased somewhere else. So from the both points, try to bring the points. Okay. Same thing they have explained further, lower corporate margins. This is one of the reasons for less room for public investment as well. Denting private investment because now low profit margins, lower investment. The scope for monetary easing might also narrow. फिर लेट कीजिए बताइए, बहुत अच्छा पॉइंट है, can come in prelims. Priyadarshini, make us understand this point. The scope for monetary easing might also narrow. Anchit?
So when the prices are already soaring, so that comfort zone wouldn't be there.
Comfort zone of what?
Like for with respect to the monetary policy. So they can't increase or decrease. Yeah, like the supply, like with respect to like RBI for example.
Supply of what?
Maybe the cash supply.
Vibhu, जा रहे हो ठीक direction, but you're not coming to the core point.
Sir, RBI sets the interest rate. It is based on the inflation. So
correct.
If inflation
This is the
is
point.
rising.
समझ गए अब? Higher oil prices, more inflation. Now monetary policy, basically RBI mandate is what? Now to control inflation. So if inflation rises, inflation is more, so RBI won't decline the interest rate. It will increase the interest rate. भाई रेपो रिवर्स रेपो इंक्रीज करेगा कि डिक्रीज करेगा? इंक्रीज करेगा. So when it increase the interest rate, how monetary easing it would be?
So it will suck out this money from the market.
Right. So once increase the interest rate, it means what? Less money available with the banks to borrow. So ultimately, it has also potential to put a check on the growth as well. Higher oil prices. Because now less money available with the banks, they will lend less. And less money for the investment. Coming to next, you see the possible eruption of trade tension amongst the major countries triggered by geopolitics, currency movement. Come to next, upside possibility to rebound in global demand and hence India's exports. So there is one chance of this, that if strong growth in global demand increases, so it has a potential to increase the India's export also. And India's export to GDP means whenever export rises, it has a very high elasticity to the growth of our country. समझ रहे हो क्या करें? The export growth of India has very high elasticity with respect to the GDP growth of our country.
Yes, sir.
ठीक है? So directly it has a potential to increase the GDP growth. Fiscal outlook, they say increase in tax of GDP ratio 0.5% in each of the last 3 years owing to the windfall will disappear. So these are small points they have discussed. Then fiscal windfall, from where this fiscal windfall can come. This is a point you try to understand, 1.72, that fiscal windfall can come after demonetization when these high denomination notes that are not returned to RBI from higher tax collections as a result of increased disclosure under Garib Kalyan Yojana as well. बताइए. Fiscal windfall means more revenue to the government. How government can get more revenue? One of the points they've given that because of this high denomination notes that are not returned to RBI. यहीं तक की समझिए और बताइए.
You have to explain this. So basically, it means everyone has not deposited the whole amount.
Correct.
And even where they were trying to deposit, they have been basically in tax rate detected. So these notes are liability on the RBI part. So that has decreased.
Right. Good.
Now currently RBI has not written them off, but
Right.
in future they might be able to write.
Are you able to understand this point? समझाओ भाई.
जो पैसा मार्केट में वापस नहीं आया, the money which has not returned to the banks, okay, they are just piece of paper, but on the note it is written I gave the sum that I will pay this much amount. So that much amount, that was the RBI liability towards the people. The note is basically the liability of RBI towards you. So the which you are not returning to the RBI, that liability has decreased. In future you cannot claim that you pay.
समझ गए हो? Now from January onwards you cannot go to the RBI कि भैया मुझे दो कुछ मतलब कि notes जो हैं, right? So that is what the liability, that much liability has decreased from RBI. That is a windfall. That is a more revenue, you can say, for the government, because RBI is issuing those notes on behalf of the government.
Only NRI can now deposit up to March.
मतलब इसमें like when people deposit their money for the IDS, so in that case also
IDS से link मत करो. Now link to demonetization. People were allowed to deposit by 31st December 2016.
ठीक है सर. ठीक है.
प्रियदर्शनी, clear है point ये?
RBI is free from the liability.
Huh? See, the thing is what happens in your on your note, what is there? लिखा होता है कि I promise to pay the bearer this much sum of money. ठीक है. Now suppose you have a lot of black money in 500,000 notes. So you won't go back to the banks to deposit that, because you tried by many ways but you failed to convert into white, despite all the various things that we saw in the news. So post December, now that money is what? Useless. So you cannot claim to RBI. तो क्या हुआ? RBI का profit हो गया ना वो? Means profit over government, because that issues on the government. So that is a windfall. That is a fiscal windfall. The same way, a lot of people, they have deposited money, higher money under income declaration scheme. So more tax revenue for the government. That is a simple point to understand. Another benefit would be implementation of GST. To understand the benefit of GST. ठीक है. Now what could be the pressure? In addition, muted non-tax revenue, allowances granted under 7th pay commission also, now that has increased, could increase the pressure on the fiscal space. So here in 1.78, they discuss certain reforms that are required to boost the growth, and the reforms are structural in nature: strategic disinvestment, tax reform, subsidy rationalization. So these are common points whenever we discuss. So these points are given there. Now come to directly the 6 other issues. UBI, universal basic income. It says central government alone runs 950 central sector and central sponsored sub schemes, which cost around 5% of GDP. Remember this data. ठीक है? कितना सेंट्रल सेक्टर और सेंट्रल स्पॉन्सर्ड सब स्कीम्स हैं आपकी? 950. And it costs around 5% of GDP. And one of the issue has been on misallocation as well, as we have seen from the earlier that figure, that data, that the districts that house the most number of poor are the one facing the greatest shortfall in the allocation of funds. So it leads to certain kind of the why it happens. So whenever you go for say distribution of subsidy, misallocation happens. So there are different kind of errors that could happen. One thing is exclusion error, another inclusion error, and lastly leakages. What I'm trying to just make you understand, whenever you go for subsidy distribution, it can lead to various issues or certain kind of the challenges there are. One thing is inclusion error, another exclusion error, and third is leakages. What comes in inclusion error means
non-poor non-poor,
correct.
Targeted employer.
Means people who are not targeted for the subsidy, means more kind of affluent people, means non-poor people, they get included in the list of beneficiaries. That is inclusion error. What is exclusion error? Means people who are poor, who deserve the subsidy, they are excluded from the beneficiary list. Leakages, you understand, I believe. Clear है यहाँ पे? समझ रहे हो इस चीज को? So how you can, for example, somebody asks you how you can improve these kind of the deficiencies, inclusion error, exclusion error.
DBT.
DBT is mainly you can address the leakages part. ठीक है? But how you can address the inclusion error and exclusion error?
The proper mapping of the people.
सही कह रहे हैं वैसे basically तो part this is one. So give example socio-economic caste census. ठीक है? So that data can be used or further that can be strengthened further. And if you just want to address, you don't have some ways by which you can say, for example, address the inclusion error. So you go for what? ठीक है भैया, कोई दिक्कत नहीं. Just like once you go for food subsidy, and you have doubt that because of say targeting the subsidy, many deserving candidates may miss the subsidy. So what you can do, go for कि भाई सभी को दे दो. This can be one of the way to address the exclusion error. कि ऐसा ना हो कि कुछ लोगों को निकालने के चक्कर में, right, we end up not giving subsidy to really deserving people. But this is something where if we have the sufficient resources at the government disposal, so even that doesn't become feasible from the fiscal space of the government side. So UBI actually trying to address this issue while instead of going for all these things, so many 950 central sector scheme and schemes, so many kind of errors happens, so many kind of the say leakages happens. Why not to give a particular decent sum of money to each and every individual? That is universal basic income. So chapter will come, we'll discuss further on in that. So in 1.82, this survey, even our chief economic advisor who has written this survey, so he had proposed earlier as well, somewhere in I think around 9, 10, somewhere around that, universal basic income. So kind of ideology is having that this should be there, and he has proposed in now in economic survey. Which other country has implemented this?
Sure.
Universal basic income.
Finland or Sweden?
Finland, right. Now they've given Mahatma Gandhi's objective in 1.82, wiping every tear from every eye. Come to next. These are issues that had been in the global arena. Global financial crisis, Eurozone crisis, China's scar of 2015, international trading opportunities are becoming scarce. So it tells about export GDP ratios declined. And discuss about how yuan, the compulsion of delaying its rebalancing strategy, might lead to a weak currency policy going forward. So China is also facing issues regarding that. On one side, it's trying to rebalance its economy. So I believe you understand whenever any article or the survey says China's attempt to rebalance its economy. So understand what kind of rebalancing attempt from China it is. Take it from the export-led growth to consumption-led growth. On the other sense, you can understand because when wages increase, the low-cost manufacturing competitiveness that China enjoyed, that it won't longer be able to do that. So what it wants to do, because when wages increase, it wants to go from low-cost manufacturing to high-end manufacturing, service-oriented. What is there in the say developed countries? Are they manufacturing the low-cost manufacturing? No, they're very good at high-end manufacturing. High-end, there they have the huge competitiveness. So it tells about for the exports need to track India's competitiveness, competition from the Vietnam, Bangladesh, Philippines. Understand this. We have competition with respect to Bangladesh and Vietnam in with regard to what? Textiles, yes. In the trade policy, global trade policy, they have again brought the instances of Brexit, US elections. So how they have led to sharp rise in the dollar. So the survey proposed that India and other emerging economies, they should now take the leadership role of globalization, because now once US leaving that particular role, UK going away, right? Now that particular seat becomes vacant, where some countries need to pursue the goal of globalization. Now India's benefit and other emerging economies' benefit lies in where? Lies in the globalization. Why? Because more globalization, more trade, more export of the by the India, and very high elasticity of our country's GDP growth to our export growth. It says a vacuum in the international trade leadership is being created, which must be filled with voices and influences such as India's that favors open markets. And for that purpose, India will also need to liberalize its economy, need to open itself more, right? Because how we can ask some other countries to open their markets unless we open ourselves more? So this is some compulsion that India needs to do, that this survey suggests. Regarding labor-intensive exports, to negotiate free trade agreements with UK and Europe, it is suggested. Now, one of the US retreat from TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership, and now we don't see any future for TTIP as well, because how the current US administration stance is. So reviving the WTO and multilateralism more broadly could be proactively pursued by India, right? So how do you find this TPP, this doing away with TPP? Is it beneficial for India or it has negative repercussion? Hmm? Yes, beneficial it is. Climate change India, whatever discussion they have done, that India has moved away from carbon subsidy regime to carbon taxation regime. So I believe you understand this. Just listen for a moment. जो दिया गया वो सारा basically this is the crux. Carbon subsidy regime, in the earlier times we used to provide subsidy on the usage of, say for example, oil, on the petroleum, on the diesel, on the different kind of the oil and different kind of the carbon, the coal, we provide the subsidy. But slowly we have moved towards taxing them. We have done away with the subsidy on petroleum, on diesel, deregulation we have done, right? Now we also put more taxes, isn't it? When oil prices they have been falling down, we have been consistently rising the excise duties, right? That's why the prices, despite higher fall in the prices in the international oil, our prices didn't fall much. Why? Higher excise duties resulting into higher indirect tax revenue for the government. Last year the collection was very good, even more than the targeted revenue. क्यों टारगेट से ज्यादा अचीव हो रहा है? कैसे हो रहा है? More excise duties on this oil, right? Though certain countries they decided to uh, transfer the benefit to the consumers, but we didn't do so. So it shows what? It's a taxation on what? Carbon, right? So it's a carbon taxation. In that way you can understand. Secondly, carbon cess that we levy. Clean environment cess. That is the current name of that. How much is that? 400 rupees per ton. पर टन कोल के ऊपर लगता है coal cess. Clean environment cess the name is. So this is the understanding from this climate change. So basically now with the climate change, and we also have apprehension regarding how US policy would be, because now with the present US administration, that is America first, right? So it becomes very difficult to negotiate in the climate change, and once US goes out of those say negotiations and doesn't implement, then the whole implementation shall be flawed, because now more in fact implementation or more convincing implementation has to be from the developed countries, and to support the developing in doing so, right? Whereas the US administration sees what now they're relying more on the say according to their policy that they will rely more on the coal based energy. However, earlier administration, Obama administration, had relied in the future more for the renewable energy. They had made the plans for that. But now the Trump administration want to reinvigorate the coal based energy. Then how US commitments to the climate change shall fructify? The Paris deal, all other deals. In India, ratified Kyoto Protocol second uh, commitment period 15 to 20. Right? What is the benefit of this? Or how do you see this? I believe you know this information, this advancement. सुना होगा आप लोगों ने ना? When India did this, why India did this, and what's the benefit? Simple question है. Benefit तो simple बता सकते हैं. Yes.
Transfer of technology, green technology.
One of the diplomatic benefit would be India had been pursuing earlier other countries to sign and ratify it. But there had been pressure that when we have not done it, it was becoming very hard for us in the negotiations. So now once we have done it, so we can pursue this with a more rigor. भाई हम नहीं करेंगे औरों को कहते रहेंगे तो कब तक पॉसिबल होगा ये? ठीक है? Environmental benefit है just how unfit. Come to the next one, ensuring women's privacy. Now you can see there financial year 2015, the violence against women related to coercive family planning methods. Now it's a very important point. ठीक है, अब क्या समझते हैं इस सिंगल एक लाइन से? Yes, anybody?
Yes. So because of family planning method, maybe the dignity and the respect that women are not to be given, with respect to health and other things, social status. So maybe because of that, the violence is depreciated.
Family planning in family planning method, 97% are women and 3% are men. So recently in Bihar, they have given a post to what target.
Yeah, Vibhu is correct about it. What is that? That basically what happens in the family planning is sterilization. There are different ways of family planning, using the precaution, going for the sterilization, right? So when people go for sterilization, there are two ways: whether the woman goes for tubectomy or the male goes for vasectomy. So basically, because of male-centric society, patriarchal attitude, though tubectomy is a complex in relation to vasectomy, still women are forced to go for tubectomy. So it showcases the discrimination in this gender unequal society and how it threatens the gender justice. Right. So it happened in Chhattisgarh in 2014, I think, October November period. What happened during that time? In Bilaspur, a place in Chhattisgarh, a, a sterilization camp was organized, right, and it led to the death of around 30 to 40 women. Still, the case is going on, and if you are following the yes, it came in the newspaper as well in a small news. So mention this as an example. Nowadays, कुछ कहना चाह रहे हैं?
Bihar and Jharkhand, those issues were going.
These same issues?
Yes.
Okay.
So it is in all over India.
Yes, it's happening all over India.
Because they illiterate doctors
Correct.
say that just think with this.
Thing happens what? It is also a flow. For example, question comes in the you need to discuss the family planning. What is the family planning policy? Population policy, for example. Population policy of India. So there's a flow in our population policy. With our population policy, it though it one side it articulates gender neutral family planning, right? But it has fixed the targets. Secondly, it incentivizes the different doctors. It incentivizes the ASHA workers, right? Now, once they are incentivized, and when this culminates with when it comes along with the patriarchal attitude in our society, so those ASHA ANM they ultimately start pressurizing the woman because they will be incentivized, right? But they don't ask the male members of the family, they ask the female members of the family. So when these both things they come together, it leads to, say, gender discrimination and even takes away the right from women even to decide the right of their body itself. In the last survey, mother and child, this was chapter. What this chapter discussed? Brief में बताइए अगर आपको ध्यान है तो. The second line says what of this paragraph? Mother and child. There was a chapter in the last year survey. Do you remember Vibu? पढ़ा आपने survey? हाँ. क्या कहता है? बस 3-4 लाइनों में बता दीजिए क्या कहता है.
Talked about the women and their well-being, how the government initiatives should be more streamlined so that the health of the women and associated with the small children could be uplifted.
Agree question. Even if I ask anybody who had not read chapter, ना वही बताएगा जो आपने बताया. Means there are general things आपने you'll try to bring.
Pregnancy issues are discussed, that weight gain during pregnancy and weight before getting pregnant and weight gain during pregnancy is of India's women severely low, which results in malnutrition and other things.
It is one of the point there. Yes, good.
We talked about the under 5 mortality rate due to anemic children or intake of folic acid और ये सब ज़्यादा.
बहुत अच्छा. So what this basic idea in the chapter is कि we have limited physical capacity. It accepts. That says it means once we have limited physical capacity, it means we have to spend our resources very efficiently, very prudently. Where we should spend is spend on those areas which can give maximum return to us. Then it says mother and child is that area where we invest the maximum. Why we should invest maximum in the mother and child? Because the maximum, you can say, maximum growth in a person happens in the first 1,000 days. The maximum cognitive and physical development of a person happens within first 1,000 days of the birth. And whatever the nutrition, whatever the health in these years, the first 1,000 days that becomes, that cast shadow for the whole life of the person. So if the person is healthy, nourished or not, it depends on the early years, early days of birth, and even during pregnancy, basically. And that depends upon the nutrition of the mother also. So just how Vibhu mentioned that pregnancy, weight during pregnancy. So it's a very typical scenario in our country that weight before, say, at the time of pregnancy is low, and even weight during the pregnancy, weight gained during pregnancy is also very low because of anemic conditions and resulting into a malnourished child. So, बाकी different points, and now come to the next. What is that? Now it says regarding relationship between sanitation practices and health outcomes. So I believe you understand the relationship between sanitation and health, right? Then disproportionate burden that falls on the women and girls due to deficiency in sanitation facilities. Very important point. You need to link these things: sanitation, health, linkage to women and girls specifically. Then the burden of women can take several forms. Very good points are given there. Read them. Threat to life and safety while going out for open defecation. Reduction in food and water intake practices to minimize the need to exit the home to use toilets. Polluted water leading to women and children dying from childbirth related infections, and a host of other impacts. Second point is very good. People generally forget this point while writing the issue of sanitation and impact on women. Reduction in food and water intake practices, because if they take the water in ample amount, they'll tend to go for the toilets more and more, but they don't have toilet at home. So what the solution they brings? They reduce the consumption of water and food, and that has highly adverse impact on the health of women. I believe you understand the other points. These are next. It talks about women's personal hygiene, not just better for health, but also has intrinsic value in conferring freedom that comes from having control over their bodies. Try to bring these kind of emotions somewhere in your answer writing. A kind of the basic right to physical privacy. Then it uh, elaborates in a very beautiful line that impeded access may well be creating gender-based sanitation insecurity. So 1.104, very good paragraph it is. In the next one, in 2011, the census reported that more than half of the country's population defecated in open. Now remember this data, very important data. So 2011 census, it said what? More than half, more than 50% of country's population defecated in open. But now recent survey, it shows that about 60% of rural households, what this survey is? Ministry of Drinking Water and Sanitation 2017. And 89% of urban households, this is NSSO data 2016, have access to toilets. A considerable greater coverage than reported by census 2011. So it's a positive point. Once question comes on open defecation, sanitation, then we showcase the how say low level of sanitation we have. Then we show how what kind of improvement has been done. So this data gives you that improvement status. तो याद रखना इस डेटा को 60% of rural households and 89% of urban households. The kind of burdens, disproportionate burden of women households without toilets. Understand what kind of issues would be there. Then come to next, household with toilets. It has been seen that in household with toilets, women report far greater, this is good point, usage of those in-home facilities than men, suggesting there may be greater demand amongst women. It's a good point there. Read the point that for the household with toilets, women report far greater use of these in-home facilities than men. So it shows what preference for household to defecate in open because of variety of factors. Now, what actually this can be, how this information can be used somewhere. It means by encouraging the women in those households, because what you see, even after building the toilets, people still prefer defecating in open. But these people are who? These are the male people of those families, right? So, in fact, it is a kind of behavioral change we have to bring. How this behavioral change can be brought? It can be brought by encouraging those women. The women, they understand it, they are using it, so they can play the role of making their men also use those toilets. So this is something that change can come from within the family. Even this kind of the say ideas you can use in while solving certain case studies as well. I believe you are able to understand how and where to use it, right? How to use in case study somewhere this kind of ideas. What I mean to say, when you try to solve certain case study, for example, one of the case study came in 2015 mains, that was regarding the elders of certain kind of the physical assault happened on certain girls of a village, and the elders asked the people of the village not to allow the girls to the schools. You are made certain officer, certain district office, maybe certain DM, SDM, whatever it is, and you have to ensure, because education is very much important for everybody. Right to Education Act also has to be implemented. How do you handle the situation? Now, there can be various ways. While I just brought that case, why? Because I found certain idea that can be used there. Because at that time you try to bring support from the people themselves. There will be certain section of people that will support you. This is how, in this case, the woman who will support your idea to use the toilet, and they will try to bring change in their men's mindset. समझ रहे हैं क्या कह रहे हैं? तो वहां पर भी in that sample as well, population sample also, that is our area of consideration, there will be certain section of society, those who will support, certain moderate will be there, certain liberal people would be there who will support your idea of education for the girls as well. So trying to those people along with you, rally them along with you. Secondly, now there will be certain more conservative people, right? Then how do you infiltrate in their mindset? You try to bring in those households who will be more easy to convince. They're women. They understand more the impact of education for the girls, because they had been doing this kind of the activity in the household, and they know because of low education they have been pushed to the margins. So that can further help to encourage the men there. Means there's a way how do you even use this kind of the discussion while solving the case study. समझ में आ रहा है कभी क्या कर रहे हैं? So just try to bring certain people along with you who have the same frequency of thoughts. Even this paragraph, this discusses in the last, you try to come to that point. Now what this pattern of use says, suggests is that women and girl children could play a key leadership role to play in Swachh Bharat's objective of creating defecation-free communities by nudging men and boys of the households to change their own defecation behaviors. Do you see that? So it's a first step to tackle the issue. First acknowledge the problem by there is problem. You understand that. You understand the problem that there is a social taboo associated with it, and try to bring certain positive behavioral patterns that women demonstrate upon obtaining all these are given. Ensuring safe and adequate sanitation, water security, hygiene objectives of Swachh Bharat. So you read all these points. Come next, India soon to be recited demographic dividend. It discuss about the demographic dividend, demographic that how we discussed in the earlier time that India is a sweet spot of economy. Why? Because we have a demographic potential. We have high working to non-working age population. We are a youth country, right? But this demographic window won't remain open forever. So we have to capitalize within this period of time when we have a young population. How to do it? There are various points. I believe you understand those points. क्या क्या करना होता है? Skill development, education. क्या करेंगे और? For example, question comes how.
Employment.
Yes, बताइए. Now we are. This is not the part of discussion, sorry. But for example, say you have to capitalize on demographic potential of our country. How? What will be your strategy?
Improving the entrepreneurship rate.
ठीक. One thing is
ecosystem.
Education, skill development,
vocational courses,
women empowerment,
vocational courses, skill development में आपका आ
caution
जाएगा.
केंद्रास to be more
skill development.
Skill development में आ जाएगा.
Job opportunities.
ठीक है.
some more industry
Broad headings. There will be many more points within those. ठीक है.
Employment opportunities.
And those you can bring, I think, is हाँ. Employment बहुत अच्छे. भाई केवल skill create करने से बात नहीं बनेगी. To create more employment as well.
Industry tie-ups.
Right. More industrial development. Our national manufacturing policy. What is that?
Yes.
क्या कहता है ये?
To double the employment.
I think 100 billion jobs. I think.
100 says,
Right? 100 million or 100 billion? 100
million,
million, right?
million.
There won't be 100 billion, right? Anyway, 100 million jobs by 2022,
yes.
right?
Sir, making a robust ITIs.
वो उसके अंदर आ जाएगा स्किल डेवलपमेंट के अंदर सारा.
So encouraging entrepreneurship for creating more jobs.
हाँ कह सकते हैं ये भी दोनों पहले भी यूज कर सकते हैं.
Changing in laws, changes in labor laws.
वो फिर आप एम्प्लॉयमेंट के अंदर आ जाएगा. ठीक है. एम्प्लॉयमेंट दिस इज लेबर लॉज kind of are an impediment in the creating the employment, right? In the वहाँ पर आप लाइए. हाँ बहुत अच्छा पॉइंट है. कॉन्फिडेंस से कहो. भाई what I mean to say, an unhealthy malnourished person won't be so much productive, right? Though he is youth or she is youth, but if the person is malnourished, not healthy, that person won't be productive, right? That won't be. So means the one thing is his or her income will be low, means support to the family will be low, his contribution to the productivity will be low to that firm and to the overall economy. To the whole nation the person shall be burdened. ठीक है. बहुत अच्छा पॉइंट है. और बताइए
सर. वुमेन
हाँ अच्छे से
उनकी भी सर हेल्थ.
देखो फिर हेल्थ का कंसर्न bring in one point only. What you can bring more? There are certain sections of society which are not so much included in the productivity. Like these are margins at the margins. In fact, like women, you show this data. Labor force participation is around 25%. हाँ तो उसमें सारा लेके आना. What I mean to say, unless all the person contribute to our economy won't be able to fully capitalize on the demographic potential. Whether it is the women, Dalits, on the caste basis also you don't find so much involvement, right? So all these things, disabled as well, bring that point. We feel like a person with disability, they are not capable enough. The general tendency taboo in the mind of people, and it further suppresses the, you can say, contribution of those person with disability. Otherwise you allow them, you make them skilled, they are equally good as anybody else. They pay taxes, they work, right, and equally contribute to the growth of our economy and to the whole nation building process, in fact. So these points means, you see, we started with a couple of points, but even if you try to bring 5-6 points you can create in this. ठीक है. पहले के 2-3 पॉइंट हर कोई लिखेगा, ट्रस्ट में, कि स्किल बिल्डिंग, एजुकेशन, ठीक है, employment, these 3 points will be the maximum common point, then health and the other points that we have discussed.
So can we include FDI in? Can we include FDI in employment?
देखो सीन क्या है, then you will try to divert from the main objective of the question. एम्प्लॉयमेंट में क्या लिखना है, वहां पर आप अलग से पॉइंट लिख सकते हैं, बट एफडीआई वोंट बी ए सेपरेट पॉइंट. समझ रहे क्या कह रहे हैं भाई? एम्प्लॉयमेंट क्रिएट करना है, वो कैसे करना, देयर कैन बी मेनी मोर पॉइंट्स, वो तो बहुत सारे पॉइंट हो सकते हैं. देन दैट इज अप टू यू व्हिच पॉइंट डू यू प्रायोरिटाइज. नाउ व्हाट दिस discusses about demographic dividend, that as you discussed earlier, that our demographic window, that peak will be at the lower level than the other countries, but it will last longer. That how we discussed in the earlier part, initial part. Come to this page 31. How this is distinctive Indian demography. It says India's demographic cycle is about 10 to 30 years behind that of other countries. So it says India's working age to non-working age population ratio is likely to peak at 1.7, a much lower level than Brazil and China. But India will remain close to its peak for a much longer period than other countries. So we have discussed this point earlier as well. So I believe you are comfortable with this. Then it says clear divide between peninsular states and the hinterland states. So you can read that. It's a basic understanding of that. Coming further to the next page. So it says demographically speaking, there are two Indias with different policy concern. Now this is important point. Means now first you understand that there are two different Indias in terms of peninsular and hinterland states. Right? Means different conditions are there. On one part, the youth population or the maximum contribution of them will rise early, or that will achieve early. But the hinterland states, that potential will come say after some period of time. So means conditions are different. So needs will be different. So policy also has to be different. We cannot have a one size fits all approach policy for the whole country to capitalize on demographic potential. So you can read that in 1.118. Demographically speaking, there are two Indias with different policy concerns. A soon to begin aging India, where the elderly and their needs will require greater attention, and a young India, where providing education, skills, employment opportunities must be the focus. Because in the aging India, focus will be on providing more services to the aging population. To the young India, focus has to be on the education health of the young people. So means first we have to categorize if there are different sections of society, right? Policy making has to be differently. I remember a case study this year, 2016 means. This case study was on tribal policy making. Just understand it. You are made certain officer at the top level who can decide completely independently on the policy making for the rehabilitation of the tribal people. Right. So what is given there, that tribal people suffer in the rehab. You understand the corrects? Tribal people face difficulty in the rehabilitation, don't get the exact employment, integration to mainstream, or whatever the way. Means they face, in fact, the hardship after any development project that is implemented. Now, what kind of hardship? It's easy to interpret in that way. So what the question is, you have to frame a policy. So what shall be the policy? So आपको complete policy बना के in a kind of case study that was asked in 2016 means. Take now, you give your ideas. Let's see What do you think over it? Take a minute time. Okay, how much time you should devote in case studies, and just once you attempt the papers, it's very crucial to attempt the papers. Means what I mean to say, give the practice test papers. If you go without preparation at hand before, there are very dim chances for you to get through mains. So it means you have to practice a lot. You understand your own weak areas. You are the best judge for yourself. You can easily understand where you are lacking in the ethics paper, right? Whether case studies or whatever. So practice accordingly, separately as well, and in a comprehensive manner. Test, full test as well. Separately working helps you to improve in that area. Giving the whole test helps you to bring your all efforts in one go for that 3 hours. Helps you to give the same idea how the exam would be.
ट्राइबल का बताओ।
हाँ, इसका बताइए।
Sir, as a person in charge for the policy framing, the first thing that I would be doing is that I'll be having a close meeting with the government institutions and the agencies and the people employed over there. I'll sit with them and talk about the prevalent condition over there, about the people. Second thing I would do is to mediate with the like the important person of the tribal who is some sort of who's having social acceptance. Apart from that, I'll need to gauge the situations, their social ability, the number of women, child, what their needs are. Accordingly, I'll frame a policy. What education level, what are their needs, what are the special needs, how their behavior towards a society is there. So, part of that, I'll be making a policy that what women need, what how the childs are, what type of schooling, what type of special teachers they need, whether to be rehabilitated within that forest or to be brought to the society.
पीछे बताइए पृथ्वी। अच्छा बता रहे हैं। कीप ऑन हैव दिस एटीट्यूड ऑफ रेस्पॉन्डिंग। अच्छा रेस्पॉन्स रहता है आपका। अच्छा, यू हैवंट स्टार्टेड डूइंग एथिक्स पेपर। प्रियदर्शनी आप बताइए, कुछ आइडिया आ रहा दिमाग में? जैसे इन्होंने बताया, सेम यू कैन आल्सो हैव सर्टेन आइडियाज।
After rehabilitation or during rehabilitation, there is some in tribal area some development project is going on or will be going.
You are asking me the question?
No.
You are telling the answer.
I am just asking you. Planning before rehabilitation या after rehabilitation.
They didn't mention it. They told you just simply, भाई आपको पॉलिसी बनानी है कि कोई भी रिहेबिलिटेशन कराना है आपको ट्राइबल्स का, कैसे करना है। ठीक है, सिंपल सा है।
I will consult with the tribal peoples who are mainly affected by the project or something, and I will first I will suggest plan to giving them the basic needs of their life and
अच्छा बता रहे हैं।
So before giving anything, I think first thing ये होनी चाहिए कि वो socially आपको accept करते हैं, क्योंकि बहुत cases में देखा tribal people they attack or kill the person who is trying to help them.
कभी बताइए।
Sir, first things I would like to showcase here is the territory, sir. For a group, for a tribal group, when I'm going to completely rehabilitate them from one territory to another territory, I have to first identify the land, the suitable land. Then I have to make the minds of the people or the tribal people to be suitable in primary society. From primary, secondary, I can bring them up. So, from the primary level, related to agriculture, knowledge can be important to them. Initially, I'll start from them because they were in the tribal people. Tribal people, they were completely dependent on forest. Now they have to be made to depend on agriculture. So I'll make sure that land is allocated to them first. For this, there are a lot of Poromboku land in English. Lands, government land. Maybe I can allocate this on those lands. And apart from it, I have to talk with the youth. I have to bring them, the next generation has to be brought into mainstream. So for them, I have to give them education. So the current generation.
वही सेम पॉइंट से ठीक हो
Okay.
बेबू बताइए
Sir, first
कुछ
of all,
यूनिक पॉइंट है बताइए
Unique तो नहीं है, but I think one the people of that area मैं हिंदी में बता रही
हाँ एनी
एक तो वहाँ के लोग वैसे भी मैंने गवर्नमेंट से वो थोड़ा नाराज है कि हाँ हम लोग को मैंने यहाँ पे प्रोजेक्ट हो रहा है इसलिए हम लोग को जगह छोड़ना पड़ रहा है फिर वैसे भी वो मैंने मेन स्ट्रीम से डिफरेंट है तो उनको लैंग्वेज की प्रॉब्लम भी है तो वही उसी एरिया से जो मैंने थोड़ा लीडरशिप के लिए जो है उनसे कंसल्ट करके
गुड पॉइंट
बात करके
बहुत अच्छा पॉइंट बता रहे हैं
समझा सकते हैं कि प्रॉब्लम यही है और हम लोग को मैंने रिहैबिलिटेशन के लिए सरकार ये करेगी और ये हम लोग
इट्स अ गुड पॉइंट बट शुड बी रिटन इन अ डिफरेंट वे पॉइंट आइडिया इज गुड यार
Sir, first of all, before starting a project over anywhere, there should be first whether an say if a power plant is built,
yes,
if
right.
any alternative place is available, because for hydro you cannot change the location, but for if say a industry is being set up, for that you can change. So first, at least you should review if any other alternative is available out of tribal land. Second, after that, if no alternative is available, then you should go and talk to them. Then all his points, and after that, once they are decided, then also it should be found out what are their sources of income and whether they are like collectors or hunters or whatever. So whenever we are allocating them, say if they are hunters, you cannot they cannot be expected to go and work. They just want to collect the basic. So if that type of fruits or trees are not available in the rehabilitated land, then it is no use.
Good point. So yes, very good
should
point.
Be also concerned, and at last, in the long run, we should always include a tribal in the decision making process.
Very good point. ठीक है. But the point you just said, now what I mean to say, कि देखो, there will be many points. Now you try to, in the different ways, you try to say that you'll consult with the tribal people. ये एक आपका common point रहा है, ठीक है. But give some institution mechanism to it. ग्राम सभा, समझ रहे हो? अब कैसे करेंगे? लीडरशिप कहाँ से ढूंढेंगे? So bring the idea from ग्राम सभा. ग्राम सभा का रोल होता है आपको पता है, right? Try to ensure कि because even for any development project under Forest Rights Act, Gram Sabha has to be consented. Prior informed consent has to be there. So you will also ensure this Forest Rights Act also gets implemented correctly. Okay, Gram Sabha should be consulted not only at when the project development happens, but also for the rehabilitation. कि भाई how you want to be rehabilitated, because they are the best judge of themselves. कि what are their skills, what kind of because there are different people with the different skills and all these things, different kind of requirements. So try to frame in a idea is same, but you just try to frame in a good way. Okay. Moreover, you can also talk about environment. None of you spoke about environment, because tribes, they are very much, their livelihood depends upon the forest resources, right? So anyhow they have to be integrated within the environment, within the forest. So you have to ensure, even if the development project happens, that hampers the environment to the minimal extent, to take the steps accordingly. Okay? Because their livelihood since the long time back, they have depended upon for their for that purpose on the forest and environment. Then you can also discuss about resources, where there are chances of generating resources for rehabilitation. पॉलिसी में आप ये भी डालेंगे भाई पैसा कहाँ से आएगा. So you can also talk about the from the development project itself, right? So the employment could be given accordingly, suitability. Even district mineral foundation is there if you read,
2%.
right? So वो भी fund है, तो like even mentioning that can help you give the examiner idea कि हाँ you have some idea कि कहाँ से fund भी आपको raise करना है, ठीक है? Even that is खनिज क्षेत्र कल्याण योजना is there. खनिज क्षेत्र कल्याण योजना, whenever any mineral mining happens, so under this yojana it is overall development of that particular region including the people, ठीक है? Now these are certain points कि हाँ कि आपको लिखने चाहिए वहाँ पर. Now one of the most effective point that I wanted to discuss, that's why I brought this case study, that and it should be starting. See, tribes are not homogeneous. Every tribes are different from each other. Santhal tribe is different from Garo, Khasi, Jaintia tribe. So once the tribes are different, their kind of the skills are different, their living is different, their demands are different. So the rehabilitation will also be tribe specific and kind of area they are living, area specific. समझ रहे हैं? One size fits all policy won't work. यहाँ पर एक क्या यही तो बात कर रहे हैं. क्या बात कर रहे हैं यहाँ पर? Demographically speaking, there are two Indias with the different policy concerns. When there are two Indias and we can expect two policies, so when I have different tribes and these are different in fact from each other, so the policy also has to be different. So you can say the policy I shall try to even though you can consult the tribal specialist as well. There are many different people, experts on the tribes. Committees have been there. So tribe specific policy should be formed and give logic why it should be. Even this particular point I think can fetch you 3 to 4 marks. क्योंकि क्या करना अंदर, those are minor things, ठीक है? उसका बहुत ज्यादा इम्पैक्ट नहीं पड़ेगा, 1-2 नंबर ऊपर नीचे होगा, लेकिन this is some point that will change the overall, you can say, framework of the policy, overall impact of the policy. समझ रहे हैं? फंड यहाँ से नहीं कहीं और से ले लिया, उससे बहुत इम्पैक्ट नहीं पड़ने वाला है, लेकिन सबके लिए अगर एक पॉलिसी बना दी तो बहुत इम्पैक्ट पड़ेगा. So whenever you see this kind of thing, to try to distinguish, it should strike. Now time is very less, frankly. Yeah. For ethics paper, say how do you divide it? Try to finish the case studies. Devote around 15 minutes for each case study, not more than that. It includes reading, understanding, writing, everything. ठीक है? 6 case studies, 90 minutes, 1.5 hour. Section A, 1.5 hour is enough. If you speed is, even if it is moderate or more than moderate, you can write it. Now going further, so I believe you understand the gravity of this kind of because you read at many of the places, one size policy won't work. बहुत जगह पढ़ते हैं ना, but apply करना है उसको if it comes. Growth consequence. So similarly, once the demographic potential or the window or the dividend that is peaking differently or will remain at the higher level differently, the same way his contribution to growth will also be differently. It says the peak of the demographic dividend is approaching fast for India. So peninsular states will peak around 2020 and hinterland will peak later around 2040. So remember this, it gives you some idea, and overall the peak will be reached in early 2020s. So even in the graph itself you can understand different states, they're peaking accordingly. Per capita income there. Now going forward. Now second growth consequence, distributional impact across India. That on average, the poorer states today have more growth dividend ahead of them. Now it's a very good analysis of this. You are able to come to this point. The point says what initially distributional impact across India, means across different states. Then on average, the poorer states today have more of a growth dividend ahead of them. It means what? This means the demographic dividend could help income levels across states converge. क्या समझते हैं आप पृथ्वी इससे? विभू आप बताइए
सर so like the developed states in India like Haryana, Punjab, okay, and but their growth rate is falling, whereas the growth rate is highest among the states which are poor like Bihar and MP, which are exceeding 10%, which is excess of national average. So in the long run, what will happen will be that when these states will rise, there will be overall convergence, basically that all Indian average growth rate.
Right, good. So the thing is, what's the reason? One of the reason is this one. There's difference in the demographic dividend, peak in that. Right, the hinterland states like UP, Bihar, MP, these states, their young population will keep on having young for a longer period of time and will peak later on. So means they have the potential for a higher growth in the coming time. And moreover, there will be higher growth because of base effect as well. Why base effect? Already there, you can say it had been low, GDP had been low. समझ रहे हैं? So remember this data, what the data is earlier, that overall the peak shall be reached in early 2020s for India as a whole, and peninsular India will peak around 2020, while hinterland India will peak around 2040. In the next page 34, we discuss about growth boost from demographic dividend is likely to peak within the next 5 years as India's share of working age population plateaus. However, India may not see the sharp growth deceleration experienced by the East Asian countries because its working age ratio will fall much more gradually than those in other countries. So understand why it does so? Because Peninsula and hinterland, again the same logic comes here. So it says why differences in timing of peak as well as opportunities. Okay, fine. That's over for this chapter. So what we have done in the first chapter, we have tried to brief the whole economic survey. Okay, why does it take more time? Because in every other page we are having different concepts. It is not something we discuss demonetization the whole, right? So it gives you an overall understanding of the whole economic survey, what the economic survey will cover in the next chapters. Now we can do one more chapter. Now other chapters won't take much time, and even they are having a lesser number of pages in those as well. Now we discuss this second chapter, economic vision for precocious cleavaged India. What do you mean by precocious and cleavaged? क्या समझते हैं आप इससे? पहले चैप्टर की हेडिंग ही समझते हैं. What does it mean? Precocious means realizing something early than expected. For example, if you say the demographic dividend peak for hinterland will come around 2040, and if it is realized by 2030, so kind of precocious. Cleavaged means divisions, right? You understand cleavage? Divisions that could be in a different way. Caste could be one of the reason. Income could be one of the way of cleavage. So I believe you understand cleavage. So the economic vision for precocious and cleverest India. So discuss about certain challenges that though on certain side we have improved regarding on our economy, but there are serious challenges. What the challenges are? It says India started as a poor democracy, and it says that the challenges in the form in part the fact that India started as a poor democracy with deep social fissures, a precocious cleverest democracy. Do you understand this? How, in what sense, this precocious cleverest democracy has been used? How precocious? In what sense it is used? बताइए आपको, I have discussed the meaning of these terms. Precocious means because we have become democracy early, and we have remained kind of the we have realized the democracy early than other countries, in the sense that uh, comparison to our state of development, comparison to our state capacity. If you see post Second World War, a very few countries were able to remain democratic. Either they turned into dictatorship by either ways, by whether single party or dictator as a single person ruling, or you see the African countries, despite or other countries in Asia as well, right? So India, and we gave even this universal adult franchise is the first in the world, isn't it? Even the developed countries, they didn't try going for the fully democratic form as universal adult franchise in the early stage of democracy. See, when these Western countries got democratic form of government a long time ago, but when they become truly democratic, a lot of period after that. Whereas in case of India, it has been other way around. So you are able to relate these things, right? And discuss about challenges, challenges regarding ambivalence about property rights in the private sector, deficiency in state capacity, especially in delivering essential services, and inefficient redistribution. So these things you have discussed in first chapter. Again, these will be there in the chapter in this one. And meeting these challenges is not just matter of overcoming vested interest. It may also require broader societal shifts in ideas and narratives. So this one paragraph describes the whole chapter. Now we discuss one by one. We see we go try to bring certain meaningful things from the different paragraphs. Here in 2.2 it says India has replaced its erstwhile social vision. Right? Now we have moved towards more openness in trade and all. It's something resembling the Washington Consensus. There is open trade, open capital. So we have moved towards. This is how our economy has moved. Then commitment to low inflation, monetary policy, all these things we have done. Right? Aadhaar bill, bankruptcy code, GST. The country's progress in terms of these openness to trade, foreign capital, public sector enterprise dominate the commercial activities. All these things are there. So these have helped India in the measure of. Now, how do we measure openness? It says measure of openness can be by a trade to GDP ratio. How much trade with respect to GDP? So, fundamental truth of geography is that large countries tend to trade less than small countries. Being large makes for the benefits of trading with the outside world very low relative to trading within the country. So, within country they tend to trade more. So, they have discussed with China, India, Brazil, US, Japan, how their comparison. So, they say low trade, all these countries 50 to 55%, even if you see here, this is the graph, trade of goods and services to GDP ratio. So see, India, China, US, Brazil, Japan, all are in the this right corner, right lower corner, right. It shows their trade to GDP on the lower end than the other countries, right? But India, see, Indian China, India is above this line. It means though it is in the lower, but still it is higher than its other countries in terms to their largeness in this age. So it says low trade ratios, but the India is above the line, meaning that it rates far more than the world be expected for a country of its size. So you understand that point, I believe. India's ratio now surpasses China as well, which is remarkable. That's why you say India trades more than China. So next, then he says that despite it talks about India's foreign capital flows as a share of GDP. Now this graph discuss about trade of okay. Coming next, this discuss about openness to capital, foreign capital flows. This graph shows figure 2. In this figure, what it discuss India's foreign capital flows as a share of GDP. And discuss that despite significant capital controls, India's net inflows are in fact quite normal compared with other emerging economies. And even the last year, our FDI has been quite robust. So FDI is running at an annual rate of $75 billion. Remember this data? How much FDI generally on an average India is having in the recent years? $75 billion. You see in the graph itself, you can see this. Capital flows, on what sense it is. Coming to next one, then it discuss about size of public sector enterprises. In PSU size, it says are exceptionally large in comparison to other countries. So if they compare with other emerging markets, so India is somewhere in the middle of that. Then it discuss about size of government. It says that it spends as much as can be expected given its level of development. So these are various factors by which India's openness or India's openness is being judged. So countries progress. So 4 standards have been used to countries. What are these 4 standards? Openness to trade, openness to foreign capital, extent to which these public sector enterprises dominate commercial activities, and share of government expenditure in overall spending. Along these 4 parameters, we have discussed one by one. So what it sums up by this discussion that India is now a normal emerging market pursuing the standard Asian development path. It is open to foreign trade and foreign capital where government is not overbearing either in micro Now come to page number 42, 2.12. Then it gives certain positive point that India on one side is shown our growth is as per normal in terms of other emerging economies when their level of, according to our level of development. So all this have been achieved under a fully democratic system, fully democratic political system. And the Indian model of being a perennial democracy after acquiring independence is rare in post-war economic history, and successes are rarely democracies. It says the only other countries that have grown as rapidly and been democratic for a comparable proportion of boom are Italy, Japan, Israel, and Ireland. So it just tells us that we have achieved this growth despite we have remained perennial democracy. The road to be traversed, it says how India is different. They discuss about there has been hesitancy to embrace the private sector and to ambiguously protect property rights, combined with continued reliance on the state to undertake activities that are more appropriately left to the private sector. So somehow there has been hesitancy, and even now we can see in the various sectors like aviation, we have seen that, right? So still there is hesitancy. There has been in the past. Second, state capacity has remained weak. Okay, but in terms of property rights, we have seen property rights at one time they have been constitutional rights. Under which article? 19F, I think, and 31, 31A, right? So now they are under article 300A, legal rights. Now they are. Secondly, state capacity has remained weak, and as can be seen from poor delivery of essential services. Now, as we discussed before, the state capacity, the redistribution has been simultaneously extensive and inefficient. If we discuss these points further, they have been discussed further. So the first, they discuss about ambivalence about private sector and property rights. So in this, they discuss about the basic objective of private enterprise, that is maximizing profit. It has been a major area of social concern, as our society does not has a tendency to have a favorable support to the private in that way. So it is being reflected in difficulty of privatizing public enterprises, even for firms where economists have made strong arguments that they belong to the private sector. Right. So despite economists, they argue for this. For example, civil aviation sector. And now still the commitment for this perennially unprofitable public sector airline, world class. So still they are trying, instead of paving the way for exit. They say recently airport privatization has been taken the form of awarding management contracts rather than changing the ownership. In the policy reform, interventionist as liberalizing spirit, as there has been restriction on pricing as well of the airport fare or the airfare. I believe you are able to link the government steps. Then regarding banking sector, the government's majority share in the public sector banks is often difficult, in part because of the view they are legitimate instruments, so they are also not taking the step of doing away with that ownership. In the fertilizer sector also, so they're trying to rehabilitate those inefficient plants, fertilizer plants, as you discussed in our previous discussion on fertilizers, right? What happens there? In fertilizer, in urea, basically it is cost-based subsidy, right? What happens in the cost-based subsidy? The subsidy is based on the cost. Higher the cost, higher the subsidy. Means it incentivizes inefficiency. And any public sector plant, fertilizer plant, they go for trying to rehabilitate rather than increasing the efficiency. So it says that it finds easier to rehabilitate public sector plants than to facilitate the exit of egregiously inefficient ones. Regarding agriculture sector, APMCs, we find so much regulation in that again, right? So this also shows the government interventionist approach. Regarding property rights, they again say earlier it was constitutional right, now it is a legal right only. Come to next paragraph 2.21. It discusses about twin balance sheet problem. What do you understand by this twin balance sheet problem? Somebody describe quickly. Yes, Priyadarshini, बताइए. Twin balance sheet. We have discussed this earlier some time ago as well. Twin balance sheet, yes. विभू
So first is over leverage.
होता क्या है ये?
Debt has been taken more than the equity debt ratio, which is 2:1. Okay, so and second is the rising of that NPA.
थोड़ा और अच्छे से ताकि कोई भी समझ जाए उसको दैट टर्म्स.
जैसे बैंक्स पे बहुत ज्यादा लोन कर्ज हो जाता है तो जब उसे उसकी माफी होती है तो इन दैट केस द बैलेंस शीट द क्रेडिट एंड डेबिट वैल्यू में तो डेब्ट बहुत ज्यादा बढ़ जाते हैं and
try to somebody ask you for example in interview if you speak like this no so you're trying to divert from the exact so somebody asks you twin balance sheet in 2-3 lines only try to explain for example question comes on twin balance sheet problem right so in the introduction itself you can define it as what it is but if you try to bring these terms like then it complicates the definition or understanding twin balance sheet means balance sheet of the banks and balance sheet of the corporate issues with both of the balance sheet of the banks and the corporates. Banks में क्या है? NPAs, corporates में क्या है? Not profit, so defaulting on the loans. As simple it is. Now what actually now this discuss about issue regarding balance sheet problem. So anyhow when some kind of banks one of the solution remains to restructures and certain times the banks they need to waive off the loans, waive off the debt as well, right? Certain bad loans that cannot be revived. So according to situation that should be done. But if loans are waived off or if say for example in that case that would be seen as a stance favoring the private sector and could face the agony of the people and people would feel like the government is supporting the private and the government can lose it will be a huge political cost for the government, right? That's why and even the agencies that comes out for example CBI, CAG, CBC, right? So even they fear the burden of fear the threat of that as well. Now you've seen in the Axis Bank or various banks, I think the CBI has started the inquiry, arrested one of the previous, I think certain Hugh, I don't remember the person who was arrested, but those persons they were at the top levels of those banks who had somehow given the loans to the, for example, Malia or other people, right? So it actually whenever these kind of things happens, it further restricts the people to decide efficiently. I'm not saying that means what I mean to say that there are honest people as well. We need to understand this thing, and there are times when they have to make decision according to the uh, records available. After decision has been made, certain new things have come out. Then you criticize. Anybody could do it. But the administrators, the people, certain times they will take decision according to the data available, according to the, say, for example, situation at that time. That's why certain times suggestion comes to bring certain amendments to Prevention of Corruption Act, so that the dangle that keeps on hanging over the bureaucrats that is removed from that. Because certain times the bureaucrats, what they say, uh, the decisions should be free and without fear, something like this, right? Free and fearless decision should be that. So fearless means, so that turns out in a wrong way, in another way. So this is being discussed as politically difficult in being seen as a for favoring the private sector, a problem which will necessarily arise in case when some private sector debts have to be forgiven. Then I discuss about state capacity. So weakness of state capacity, essentially in delivering essential services such as health and education. Just how we discussed in the first chapter. Then here it discuss about Indian state has low capacity with high level of corruption, clientelism, rules and red. So common point these are. You discuss this anywhere. Then again this is regarding competitive federalism. It says competitive federalism has helped a lot for the states in attracting investment, but not the same way with regard to providing essential services. The same thing repetition, I believe you are able to recall the points. But certain exceptions, again those points are here. Improvement of PDS in Chhattisgarh, Bihar, incentivization of agriculture in MP, kerosene-free drive in Haryana, power sector reforms in Gujarat, which improved delivery and cost recovery and efficiency of social programs in Tamil Nadu. Then again it says competitive populism is more in evidence than competitive service delivery. What is populism? With free goods, few goods and services deemed unworthy of being handed out free. Then discuss about further. Policy making in certain areas have been heavily constrained as a way of ensuring that decisions do not favor political interest. So one thing is, because ultimately the people when they decide, when all these things happens, so they have their decision is constrained, right? When there is huge whistle over them from the various investigating agencies like CBI, the government, the people as well, then what they do? They become very rule centric. That they won't take any innovative decision. They won't go out of the rules. Rule centric. So, but they, for example, auction of all the public assets, whether by auction it is optimal or not for the public policy. It happened last year when it goes for auction for spectrum auction. At one time, it didn't realize its actual value, and certain time it was sold off at higher prices. Then it could do good for the people with better services. Because it discussed here, if you see that in some cases it may be socially optimal to sell spectrum at lower than auction prices. So it leads to bureaucratic decision making, very cautious. And the bureaucrats started favoring the status quo. Let's discuss about in the twin balance sheet problem, there has been the various institutions, they have become target of the referee institutions. Remember this keyword? Referee institution. So these are certain catchy words you can use in answer writing. Referee institutions. What are these? 4 C's. What are these 4 C's? Courts, CVC, CBI and CAG. Now come to the next part, inefficient redistribution. What comes in inefficient redistribution? One thing is considerable misallocation. As you discussed earlier, you understand inefficient redistribution means one thing that we have discussed, if you remember, that the most poor districts, they were the districts with the maximum shortfall of the funds, right? So what is this? Inefficient redistribution. It shows districts with the most poor, figure 7a, as it was earlier in the data as well, suffer from greater shortfall of funds. Now discuss certain, it leads towards exclusion error, means deserving poor not receiving benefits, inclusion error, the non-poor receiving a large share of benefits, and leakages, the benefits being siphoned off due to corruption and inefficiency. So remember this whole paragraph: exclusion error, inclusion error, leakages. Now in the DBT in fertilizer is being proposed, and the pilot project is there in certain areas, certain districts. Come to possible explanations. There is unique pathway to economic success, that is precocious cleverest India. They discuss about the advanced economies. They achieved the current status of 2 centuries, right? In which, what basically the idea is, you just understand that when you read by your own, that the developed countries, they have taken a lot of period of time. Just understand it. So they have, what they have done, they have first developed their state capacity, economic growth, and in the period of time, then they have moved towards democracy, right? For a huge long period of time, even though democratic institution they were established, but there was not actual democracy within those. So in the meantime, they started enhancing the capacity of the state. Economic growth means the burden of the redistribution was not so much on them on the early phase of economic growth. And when the state capacity was developed, they moved towards more democratic form. So once you are a democracy in actual sense, so demand comes from the people for the redistribution. Now once they started redistribution, they had already achieved the capacity, state capacity to redistribute. Whereas thing in India is different. We achieved democracy, we were poor, very poor, and the government, and because we were trying to realize democracy in true form, we started with, we even gave universal debt franchise at the early stage as well. So overall, the expectation from the state to redistribute started at an early stage, despite the fact we had not achieved the state capacity. So led to, we could not go for efficient redistribution, right? So we were not effective in that sense. So this is the difference they have showcased. In case of the East Asian say political transformation only after a degree of economic success was achieved. So this is all way to build the state capacity. We discuss India independence was a very poor democracy, and it is used that when India got independence, at the same time India was also a very cleavage society. Cleavage in the sense of language, scripts, religion, region, caste, gender, and class. So many cleavages. Though other countries could have cleavages on certain fronts, but not on all. Not on all. Specifically caste. So caste had put India on a different platform altogether. So high level of poverty and deep social issues. So India started with, say, public sector focus based on the models of Soviet Union, right? But still we had the presence of private. The difference between Soviet and Indian model was what? Soviet didn't had the private at the time itself, completely public, but we had private, but we had more regulations, license Raj. This was the same thing early. India had to redistribute early. Page number 49. Page number 49 we discuss again. India had to redistribute early in the development process when its state capacity was particularly weak. So as part of our discussion that we had done. And at that time, India did not invest sufficiently in human capital. It shows how 0.22% of GDP on health and education, on health. Now it's only 1% again. So we have not improved over that yet. So 2.4 to summarize this whole discussion, that a poor country with weak state capacity like India, when confronted with the pressure to redistribute, had necessarily to redistribute inefficiently, using blunt and weak instruments. Then why this redistribution still persists, this inefficiency? it says one of the partial explanation is difficulty of exit. So exit is difficult everywhere, but why special case in India? What is that? The difficulty in poor, colourless democracy dominated by vested interest, weak institution, and an ideology that favors redistribution over investment. So it has discussed how the state capacity was weak, how this redistribution was inefficient, but why still it is. One of the reasons given is exit problem. Why exit problem in India still now? In a poor, cloudless democracy, three issues: vested interest, regarding weak institution, and ideology. What about vested interest? Just understand them one by one. Vested interest in the sense, for example, there is certain redistribution system. For example, take example PDS. So in PDS there are leakages. There is certain in the supply chain itself there are certain nodes, certain people. For example, fair price shops at any other places. Those people they divert the resources. Means the certain people who are involved in the chain they get the benefit out of it of the existing system. So whenever you try to reform, you try to bring certain DBT, so you start finding the resistance from the vested interest because their income will be lost in that case. Means the extra income that they were earning in that case. So these are kind of vested interests. So whenever you try to bring reforms, you can find the resistance from the vested interest. Secondly, weak institutions. What are the weak institutions? In the sense of, for example, DRT, debt recovery tribunals. Now it's a very paradox situation of weak institution and the strong institution both. So you can use the both terms. So on one side we have weak institutions like DRT where there are plethora of the cases comes but not able to resolve the things, overburdened. So there is issue of both weak institutions, strong institutions. Strong institutions like referee institutions. So both are creating troubles. And ideology. What kind of ideology? So overall, if you see in our country, what ideology do we have? We have the ideology of still kind of the redistribution, supporting the poor, socialism. It's not exactly socialism as it had been before, but whenever, so what it leads to, whenever certain administrators or the banks, they have to decide in waiving the loans, for example, even if it is economically, say, the best way to handle that situation. So the ideology, so people feel, or even say, for example, the government starts privatizing civil aviation sector or starts waiving of the, so it will bring the mindset among the people that the government is supporting or favoring the private. So this kind of difference, ideological difference also, this kind of ideology also favors redistribution over investment. Now 2.44, now I discussed this point, I think I've discussed before as well. Now what the idea is, as just listen to it for a moment. When the state, the thing is what, in any case of the developed countries, they go for first providing essential services, right? So once they go for providing essential services, then it encourages the people to pay taxes as well. Then it promotes the people to favor redistribution as well, right? Because actually, if you don't provide the basic services, you don't provide the basic amenities, still you go for redistribution. So the people who are paying taxes, they will oppose it. They'll say it's totally inefficient. The money is not reaching to the poor. It's only filling the pockets of the rich people, the politicians, and the bureaucrats. So the idea is, when the government with higher state capacity provides the basic amenities, basic services, so it legitimizes the government to tax. Or in other words, legitimacy of the government to tax depends upon whether the government is providing, whether the state is providing those basic services or not. Because if the state doesn't provide the basic services, then the people, basically the people who are paying taxes, once we pay taxes, we expect the government to provide the good roads. We expect the government to provide the electricity, water, clean water, clean air, clean environment. We expect these kind of the things from the government because they pay taxes, right? So if the government doesn't so, we question this kind of redistribution as well. And if the government doesn't so, another way is something that people move towards exiting the state. So they use the term exit the state. Exit the state means?
From paying tax.
Correct. People start evading paying taxes. And it's kind of vicious cycle, as you see. What kind of cycle it is, kind of spiraling effect it has. So try to understand in a way. For example, state's capacity is low, redistribution is inefficient, state failure in the is the same point. I'm just giving the different points of this. States fail to provide the essential services. Right. What it will lead to? Erodes the legitimacy of the government to tax. Further, people start exiting the state or stop paying the taxes. Once people stop paying the taxes, less revenue with the government. Lesser revenue with the government, state's capacity reduces further for the redistribution or providing the essential services. Again, the same cycle starts. This kind of spiraling effect it is. Now, the whole discussion can be seen in a different way as well. Now, just again listen to it. Now, this is not given in this survey at this time. The last survey discussed that paying taxes is something, a glue that binds people with the state. How? Because once you pay taxes, it ensures accountability of the government towards you. Because once you pay taxes, you can demand the services. It ensures accountability of the government. It ensures government to provide those basic services. So it's essential for a democratic country because once you hold the government accountable, it's a way of a democratic process. Because democracy doesn't limit itself to just voting after every 5 years. What is democracy? Democracy is actually participation of the people in the day-to-day, in the decision-making process. Isn't it? Means they cannot participate directly, so their voices are being heard by the government in that decision-making. When their voices will be heard, means they can enforce accountability, they can ensure accountability. How so? When they pay taxes. Right? So kind of even paying taxes can be seen in this way. So this discussion you can find in the next few pages. And this line summarizes the whole discussion. A state that is forced into inefficient redistribution risks being trapped in a self-sustaining spiral of inefficient redistribution, reduced legitimacy. You understand what kind of legitimacy we are talking about? Legitimacy of the government to tax. Reduced resources, because once government's legitimacy reduces, people start exiting the state. Once people start exiting the state, it reduces the resources. Once resources are reduced, then poor human capital investment. Now further it weakens the state capacity, and so on. So then they bring the perspective of demonetization, that this has been a redistributive device to elicit wealth, because they've seen why people had been supporting. Now, who were the people who were supporting the demonetization? Even the poor people they were supporting, right? Why they were supporting? They felt it's a way to curb black money. They felt once the black money is curbed, this money will be redistributed among the people, poor people basically. So even the support has come from the poor. So this is the reason why. So even they said, if you speak, even you had spoken to somebody, even the poor people, they had said it's for a short period of time, अच्छे के लिए, देश के लिए अच्छा है. Means they were looking for a larger objective that it will help them in the coming years. This had been the vision. That's all from this chapter. Now again come to this first page, first paragraph. Now read that paragraph again and try to summarize our whole discussion. Read this, Anchit. बोल के पढ़िए एक बार क्या लिखा गया.
So the ideas of economists and political philosophers, both when they are right,
पढ़ लीजिए एक बार इसको.
both when they are right and when they are wrong, are more powerful than is commonly understood. Indeed, the world is ruled by little less. Since about 1980s, India's growth performance has been robust, especially for a democracy. This has been hacked up by policy reforms that have made India more open to the flows of goods and capital, and have reduced the size of the public sector, both in the micro efficiency and macro fiscal terms. Yet, there are serious challenges that might impede further rapid progress, which emanate in part from the fact that India started out as a poor democracy with deep social fissures, a precocious and cleavage democracy. These long-standing challenges can be classified as an ambivalence about property rights and the private sector, deficiency in the state capacity, especially in delivering essential services and in efficient redistribution. Meeting these challenges is not just a matter of overcoming vested interests, it may also require broader societal shifts in ideas and narratives.
So now the task is yours. With each and every different line, it discusses different area of our discussion. Try to relate to that part. Okay. So that's all for today in this class. Now what your work will be, revise this, and not only revise, try to remember these points. If you remember the basic things from the different chapters, definitely it will help a lot. It can help anywhere. Even you won't be able to guess it out. It can help in the essay as well. It can help in the polity part as well. This democracy, administration, services are what? Polity part, administration part. So वहाँ पर भी आप ले सकते. So at different places, it's up to you where to use this information, this discussion. So try to read these two chapters and try to read the other chapters as well, so that we can speed our discussion and of economic survey. Okay? Thank you.
Good morning, people. So here we are with another such amazing video for you guys. So if you like